Alright, so here we are with part 2 of poster making with your host, Professor Oleander. Hi. Where we left off was we had the camera framed, we had the principal models in here, the actual characters. We're going to be using a heavy animatic. And the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and put the animation onto these guys and get that squared away, and then we'll put weapons in it, and then we'll put particles in it, and then we'll put lighting in it, and then we'll do the post effects, and then it'll be exported and it'll be great, and you know, we'll have women hanging off of us just because we're so freaking awesome. So yeah, okay. So what I'm going to do is, I told you in the last tutorial that I'm going to cheat, and if I can learn how to manipulate the camera here. Valve included in Source Filmmaker the animation sequences for all the models. You can get the up-to-date ones out of the GCF, I mean not the GCF file, but the VPK files from Team Fortress. And because I think the last update, the Source Filmmaker team has got a good habit of, whenever they release an SFM update, they include the localization files, so you basically get the current version of TF2 to go with it. But because the SFM updates are infrequent, sometimes they're a little dated and they don't have everything in it, which I don't think the robotic boogaloo items are in SFM just yet. I don't think they've been included. They may have. I have to go back and look. But for the most part, you've got a very basic version of TF2. You can't do as much stuff as you can in the current version of TF2, but most of the stuff is there. So the animation sets, the basic animation sets are there. So we're going to go ahead and put them onto these guys. So right click on the medic and come down here, import. I want to import a sequence, and I'm going to look through here, and I want run secondary because I'm going to have him holding a Medigun, and for the medic, his secondary weapon is his Medigun. Yeah. Alright. I'm going to go ahead and move the move X slider all the way up. You can make him, you know, moving it all the way to the right or moving it to 1. Makes him run forward. This makes him run backward. You can strafe one way or the other. Gonna move that back to 0. You can make his body. You can make it just his upper body twist, which I forget what it is he can turn. I think it's 45 degrees one way or the other, because typically the field of view for these guys is 90. So we're going to leave that at 0. You can also make him look up, make him look down. You know, do this, and that, and that, and that, so that he looks crazy. But we're gonna go 1 and 0, and you can double click on these guys and change stuff. And we'll go 0. Oh, crap. Crap. That's what I get for screwing around. Alright, go back here and put it back on him. That. And also, see this little radio box right here? Radio checkbox. It says generate root motion. We don't want that because he's not going to move. So we're going to click on that. And for whatever reason, it generated root motion, even though I told it not to. Or I must not have clicked it right. Either way. If you do this and you don't want the motion to be there, I'm going to show you a trick. For right now, I'm just going to grab his root transform, and I'm going to come over here to the Procedural tab, and see this playhead preset. I'm just going to click and drag, and wherever the playhead is down here in the time scale, that's where it's going to 0 it to. So he'll just run in place if I hit space. Alright. Now, since he's sitting here running, I want to go through his go through the frames, and I want to pick Actually, let me look in the primary viewport for this. I want to go through this, and I'm just going to hit the right arrow and just go through frames until I find one that I like. And you can just sit there and hold it, and he'll just slowly run. But I think I want to use that frame right there. So put the playhead where you want on the frame you like, which I like that one, which happens to be frame number 2. I've got my secondary viewport set up to show me frames. So I want him to be just like that and not move. So I'm going to select the medic, his entire animation set, come back over here to playhead, and drag it. And there you go. Now I can hit space and play it, and he's not going to move. Very handy tool to have. It comes in handy to do it like that because the way I used to do it was I would actually come in here and I'd put a bookmark. And I would leave him like that, and then I would go over and do the same thing for the heavy. I would put his in there, and then I'd find his bookmark, and then I would just bookmark it, and I would try and move them in such a way where everything would line up right, and it was an absolute nightmare. And then I figured out you can use the playhead to do the exact same thing. There is another way to do it. Let me move this bookmark here. Delete. Go back to frame 0. You can go into the clip editor, and actually let me do it. Let me show you the heavy so that way you can see it. This is the way that I do it now, is use the playhead preset. You can do it in the clip editor, so let's go ahead and put something on the heavy. Now I want him to do, you guys are familiar with the game, you hold the right mouse button with the heavy, and he sits there with the minigun ready to fire. So we're going to put that animation onto it, so we're going to put another sequence. Now this one's got a funny name. It's not what you would typically think. Let's see, it's primary, there it is, primary deployed movement. And slider all the way forward, turn that off, and there's no root motion this time. Now, you can move, well, apparently you can't. We're going to go into the clip editor here, and I'm just going to double click onto the clip, and see this animation channel right here? You can actually move that and move through his animation set. Oh crap, I put strafe on him and I didn't want to do that. Either way, you can, but anyway, the point is you can move these channels forward and make them sync up if you don't want to zero everything out. I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the heavy, or did with the medic, I'm sorry. Except I'm going to put the right animation on him. I am out of it. It's like 4:30 in the morning here. I decided to make tutorials, which probably wasn't the best idea. So, primary deployment. Oh, that's why, because it's, yeah, because they're in different order. I want X movement, and do not generate that. Don't generate it. And there we go. Much better. So now, same thing. You'll just sit there and just kind of walk in place, and we're going to scrub through, and we're going to find a frame, and I kind of like that one right there. So, got the heavy selected. We're going to come up here, drag the playhead preset, and there he is. So, now we've got the animation sets on these guys, and they're pretty for their weapons. So, that's pretty much done as far as getting the animation onto them. Now, you can go in and tweak these things a little bit, like, let me go back over here into the work camera. Now the medic is the hardest guy to animate, and I've been working on a walk cycle for him for, I think I've gone through like my 6th iteration of it. It just because his legs are so weird, and because he's so tall, it's hard to get a good stride on him. Without making it look too wonky. I can get his upper body just fine. Yeah, I can get the motion on his upper body really good. Matter of fact, I've got a version of his upper body that's going to work really nice. But down here in his legs, it's just kind of weird. And I noticed that when I worked with him in SFM, that his legs were really wonky. So, plus the fact that he's got all these freaking bones. His coat, you know, just all the bones down here on his coat are just ridiculous. So I'm going to, by the way, I just used the lasso tool, which you control and drag. I mentioned that in the other one, in the other video. I'm just going to drag all these bits right here for the coat, and I think I'm just going to kind of turn them down a little bit. Just a little bit, not much. It doesn't need to be much. He's got wild animations on his coat, and I think they're exaggerated for the mad scientist effect. I just tone them down a little bit, just it makes them look better. Other than that, I think let's see. Might want to turn his head, so grab his neck and do that. And maybe his head. And how does that look? How's that look? How's that look? That looks pretty good. Let's see. The heavy's pretty much there, which is unusual because usually I have to end up doing a lot of work to him. Now I'm going to move him over just a bit. Make sure he's still on the board so there's no clipping. And the Medic's got a little bit of clipping issues. See how his foot's kind of going down into the ground? I want to pick him up a little bit if I can. And I can't. So, Control Z and just kind of pick him up so that his foot's on the ground. So his feetsies, whatever, are on the ground. And this looks pretty good. The only thing I might do is take that guy right there. Oh, wrong one. That guy. And just kind of fold it down a little bit. Just to kind of close up that area right there. Because I don't want it to look like there's a hole. You can just barely see part of his coat right there. And it won't matter because once you turn on the lighting, it'll be kind of dark. But we're going to have lights in here. And that will probably show through. So I just want to do away with it. So let's turn the lighting back off. And we're ready to put the weapons on them. You can do the facial posing now. I'll do that in just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and put the weapons in it. But before I do, I want to show you guys something. This is an SFM guide. It is on the Steam community. It was made by these guys right here, Private Jack, who, by the way, if you have not seen his videos on YouTube, they're worth looking at. He has done quite a few of them. He's sort of taken on the mantle of Jimmer Lins. He's almost doing a video a day, tutorials of how you can do various things in Source Filmmaker. But these other guys, this R234, he's got some good tutorials. He's also got some good videos on YouTube. I don't know these other guys in between, but what they have done is they have made a list of every weapon model, miscellaneous, and hat in Source Filmmaker, and they've also included their file names. Because if you're like me, some of these models are a pain in the ass to find because the file names don't match what the name is of the model. Like, let's see if I can find one down in here. For the most part, the weapon models and most of the stuff that Valve made has got a file name that's very similar to the name of it in the game. Some of the community contributed stuff doesn't, because the actual name that they used during when they made the model isn't the same name that Valve assigned to it. Like you may let's see if I can find one down here. I know there's one in here. Like some of this stuff, like Bear Claw. This is probably what it was called when it was submitted to the source to the workshop, and it's called the Warrior Spirit. So if you were to go into SFM, which I'll do that right now, and put in model, and say I wanted to find Warrior Spirit, it's not going to come up. But if I go back over here and pick model viewer here for a second, and I put in bear, or I put in C underscore bear underscore claw. There's the bear claw model. Now I don't want that right now, but I'm going to put the link to this in the description so that way you guys can see it. It's a very handy tool. It has everything up to the Mecha update, so all the Christmas items are in here. It does not have the robotic boogaloo items. It also has stuff that's broken down. The all-class stuff's in here. The all-class miscellaneouses are in here. It also has a paint table, which these are all the colors that you can buy in paint cans. And Source Filmmaker uses color base 1, which means all the RGB values are off of, or they're based off of 1 meaning 100%, or same thing as these RGB. It's got the hexadecimal numbers as well. Very handy to have. I also suggest that if you're going to be doing a lot of Source Filmmaker, it's good to have an RGB table anyway, just so if you want to make a light a certain color, you know what values you should be using. So that's that. I know that what I'm going to be using is going to be the Medigun, which happens to be called undoubtedly Medigun, and I know that the Heavy is going to be using a minigun, and it's called Minigun Heavy. You notice that there are view models and weapon models. We're just going to be worrying about the view models. So I encourage you guys to check this thing out, because when I first started with Source Filmmaker, I wished that somebody had made this, because it is so handy. So we're going to pull up the weapon models for the Medigun. Actually, let me do the minigun first, because I want to show you guys something for the Medigun. So we're going to pull up the minigun. And most of you guys are going to be familiar with how to do this. It's very simple. I want to lock the minigun onto the Heavy and open up its children files. I want the weapon bone. Now I want to go ahead and get the weapon bone for the Heavy, and there it is right there. There's nothing else on here. Yeah, so just select the weapon bone of the Heavy, drag it down onto the weapon bone of the model. Now this is very important. If you select the entire Medigun and you hit 0, something weird happens. Let me show you. You don't notice it at first because of the way that this weapon's made. Well, actually you do notice it. See what happened? Everything, all the bones of the Medigun, zeroed to the weapon bone. And we don't want that. Not only that, but the muzzle, if you come over here and look at it, if I hold control, you can see some of this stuff. Well, you should be able to see some of this stuff. Why is there no muzzle? That's interesting. This one, I've never realized that this one doesn't have a muzzle. You have to manually place stuff. But anyway, you got the barrel here, which turns. But any weapon like this, if you grab the whole thing and you zero it, all of these bones right here go to where you zeroed from. So we're just going to grab the just grab the weapon bone and hit 0. And since the weapon bone for this one is the base for the model, when this model was made, it was built around the weapon bone. So the weapon bone is what moves the whole thing. And I'll show you what I mean when we pull up the Medigun, because it's going to be important. So for right now, we're going to leave that. Actually, yeah, let me pick it up just a bit. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and bring the Heavy forward. That'll work. I think whenever I did it before, I had the Heavy kind of over this way. We're going to change the camera angle so that way he'll shrink a little bit in the frame. But anyway, we got the minigun in here. Let's go ahead and I'll quickly put the Medigun in here, because I want to show you something that's going to be very beneficial. If I could find it, it's down here. Now there's two models of the Medigun. There's the weapon model and you come up here, and then there's the complete model. Right now, we want the weapon model because it has a muzzle. Oops, grab this one. Alright. If I hold control, you can see it's got a muzzle. It's also got all these guys. Now, I'm going to show you a trick that's going to be very useful for putting in weapons, putting in items that are built like the Medigun, and they have all these freaking bones. The trick to these guys is you have to figure out which is the primary bone of this weapon, because this has got two weapon bones. It's got a weapon bone here. It's also got a weapon bone here. Now, if I grab the weapon bone here, you would assume that that would be sort of like where it's supposed to go, or you would assume that that's the main one, but it's not. It's actually weapon bone L. And the way you find out is if I grab weapon bone here and pick up on it, it's not moving. It doesn't move. Let's see, there should be something else in here. If I grab weapon bone L, see how it moves? Now that's important, and the reason why it's important is what I'm about to do is going to make it so you can move this model. Now, you see where the root transform is? See how that's on the weapon bone? The root is, you can grab the root and it will do the same thing. It'll move the weapon around. But since the weapon bone L here was built into the root, that's what they based it off of. That's sort of like the center of the weapon. If you look at it, the whole weapon was built off of it when it was modeled. So, to get it over there, and to get this hose curved, you notice that if you look on the model here, all these hoses right here, there's one there, there's a couple more over in here, they're curved, and you can either come up here and open up the medic's hierarchy, come down to unknown, look through, find all the bones, and find the joint hose, move that down here, and drag and drag and drag and drag, and just keep on mind-numbingly tedious and just absolutely boring. You can do it that way, or I found a much easier way to do it. Now, the Medigun is unique in that the root transform is not based off of the root transform of the model. Like the Medic's root transform is down at his foot. The root transform on the Medigun is actually where the weapon bone should be. So if you were to lock all that stuff on, select the model, and then zero it, what would happen is the Medigun itself would actually go down to the Medic's feet, and it would stay there. Not only that, but the hoses and everything would zero to the root transform. Now, there's a trick that I figured out about how to get this over there, and it takes less than a minute. You don't have to sit here, you don't have to click and drag stuff and lock it to each other and then zero it. What you do is you come up here, you select the body group. Now, you take note of what groups you have down here in your weapon, which has got a body, has the other, and has the unknowns. And they're based off of the the same groups that the medic has. So he's got a body group, he's got another group, and he's got an unknown. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on body. We're actually going to open up body, not arms. We're going to unselect the root transform because we don't want that. We're going to control click onto other and unknown. Come down here into the animation set. We're going to right click and copy samples. We're going to go up here, we're going to select the Medigun, the body, which we're not really going to worry about. We're going to get other, and we're going to click unknown, and then we're going to paste them. Now notice what happened. The Medigun is actually conformed to the way that the medic is standing. That's, if you were to move the Medigun over there, which we're about to in just a second, it would be in the exact spot that it needs to be to look like he's carrying it. Now remember how I told you that you needed to figure out which bone you can use to move the model, which I know it's weapon bone. So we're going to grab the weapon bone L, and we're going to come over here to the medic, and we're going to look for weapon bone L, which happens to be an unknown. And there it is right there. We're going to grab it, drag it down here, lock it onto him, grab just the bone, just the weapon bone L, come over here, and 0 it. And there it is. He's carrying it. It took less than 30 seconds to do. You didn't have to go through, you didn't have to find the bone, you didn't have to drag a whole bunch of stuff. And now why is this important? I'll show you. If I come up here, and let's say I want to put one of the coats on the medic. You got all these coats here that came up after the Total War update. If I've got one of these coats, let's say we'll pick that one right there. We're going to spawn it. Okay, there it is. Now it's in the reference position. Now this one has got 2 bones that you can move to move it around. It's got a root transform, which is in the same position as the root transform on the medic. So you can move it around this way. Or you can also come up here, see how it's got the spine group? The pelvis will do the exact same thing. And coincidentally, the pelvis on the medic will do the exact same thing. You can grab his pelvis and then you can move it. It's not a very wise decision to animate the root, because the root can do funky things. It can actually mess up your animations if the root has got bad input. I won't go into it. I just know from experience that if you start animating on the root and you do something that the root doesn't like, it will mess up your model. So we're going to do the same thing with this one, except we can just select everything because the root transform is in the right position, and because the pelvis is in the right position too, because it's anchored off the pelvis. We can copy all this, which, let's go down here and figure out what body groups it's got. It's got body, arms, and unknown. So we're going to select body, arms, unknown. Come over here, right click, copy the samples, come back over here, just select the whole thing, and paste samples. And there it is. It's on him. Very handy thing to do. It's a very handy piece of information to know. It saves a whole lot of time. Now the only downside to this is you're stuck with what animation you've got, which means if I were to come up here and put another, put animation on the medic, which let's just show you. If I were to take his shoulder and turn it down, see how that model is still staying there. That's because I've only put the animation onto it that I had up until that point, which is, it's not a big deal. You can go back and recopy the animation from the medic and put it back onto the coat if you want to. It's one of the disadvantages of not being locked there. If you locked everything, it didn't matter what kind of animation you put onto them. It would move in conjunction with whatever it was locked to. But, it's just a little bit of a workaround, and it saves me so much time whenever you're doing this. So, that's pretty much that. That's all I wanted to cover as far as that goes. It's a very handy trick to have. So check out the guide and experiment with copying the animation sets onto these guys. It's a pretty big shortcut, and it will save you so much time, but beware that not all the models are as easy as that. It depends on how they were made. Some models you can just copy and paste like what I did. Other models you're not so lucky with it. It just all depends on how it was made and what it was based off of, because some models are based off the root, other models are based off of specific bones. I will tell you this, that if a model is using the pelvis, chances are it was built off the pelvis, which it looks like this one was probably built off the root, which makes sense because I think Valve designed this one. The other coats I'm not so sure of, but so that's that. I'm gonna leave it there with this one, and in the next one I'll probably put a couple more items on these guys, and we'll do the lighting. So, see you in the next one.